regardless of which income group or what their background is, everyone to have safe drinking water. And so the goal is to, with the reduction to 7.2 parts per billion, is to ensure everyone's drinking safer water than before, because before it was at 85 parts per billion. And then to put in place mechanisms that if we see exceedances coming, that action is taken. So under the consent judgment, if a well is found with 3 parts per billion in it, then there are requirements that bottled water be provided to that home or homeowner or whoever it is who's affected by that immediately. And additional steps then are explored to address that. But I don't know that there's any, we're trying to treat everyone who's affected by the plume in the same manner to make sure everyone is safe. I hope that helped. I'm not sure.
Kind of. I'm less concerned with a lot of water keeping everyone safe. It's not everyone's at the same level.
Not everyone's at the same level of being able to bounce back from that. Bottled water can only go so far. It's a loaded question, I know, but something to at least think about and really consider too, because I mean, Washtenaw County, I'm gonna be honest, we have a very concentrated amount of affluent people who can go buy bottled water, who can buy water purifiers, who can do all these things. And there are people that don't. And people who don't own what they don't control what goes into their home. They don't necessarily have as much of a choice. They don't have time to come to these meetings. Not only time, but they can't get to these meetings. So thinking about those people who aren't even on the same level. So it's more than just a water bottle.
Well, I'm sorry, I certainly did not mean to minimize other questions. Okay. But when we say provision of bottled water, we mean that Gelman will provide bottled water, not that a homeowner would. And obviously, these environmental impacts can impact different people in different ways. I know and I have confidence that Eagle is working hard to address environmental justice issues to ensure that we are looking at all communities and making sure that they're not overly impacted by environmental contamination.
Thanks. Okay, here and then Mike Moran.
Aloha. My name is Gordon Bigelow. I live in Ann Arbor. I've been here for 27 years and I don't want to die here from drinking the water. I think that what you're discussing hinges on the toxicity of 1,4-dioxane. And I know that when I wanted to use 1,4-dioxane in my research, because it closely mimics water in its properties, I had to go to a Russian journal of physical chemistry to find out. I wonder what the latest work is that has been done on toxicity of 1,4-dioxane and whether it would be fruitful for the state to fund a study by the toxicology department of the University of Michigan to look into what we're really dealing with here, because everything, all these levels of contamination hinge on how toxic this substance is. So can you tell me what you know about this and just how it relates to the levels of contamination we're talking about?
Yeah, I'm not a toxicologist, so I would be wary about treading into the toxicity and that sort of thing. It's believed to be a carcinogen, and so at the levels that we're talking about, there's toxicologists do those calculations to determine what's an acceptable drinking water level or not. As you've heard before, there's many people that say that the state of Michigan level is not low enough. So by law, when we do toxicity values or criteria, one of the differences we see like between us and the EPA is the cancer risk calculation is 1 in 100,000 in the state of Michigan when they calculate levels. And for EPA, for example, it's 1 in a million. So that gives you that factor of 10. Because that's the big driver and the difference in the numbers that you see state to state.
Do you know what those data are based on? Whose study and where the study was done?
I don't know. I can't cite you the studies. I mean, the EPA and other people have done study, and when toxicologists review those things, they look at the most recent toxicity studies that are out there, and I do not know what's the most recent or how often those are done. I'm
Can we
sorry.
get that information for you and share it, because I know
Well,
we've got.
I don't think that, as you say, the level of contamination is, or the level of toxicity is not at all well decided, and so there is much to be studied yet. And further, it's not just the concern for human health, but also the concern for the environment in general, having this contamination in the groundwater.
Yes. So I'm sorry, I can't answer your question as far as what you're looking for in toxicity studies.
We've got some experts, Mike Moran.
Thank you. I'm Mike Moran. I'm Ann Arbor Township trustee, previously was supervisor for about 18 years, 16 of them dealing with this problem. I'm also a lawyer. It's true, as has been said here, that we are hamstrung by Michigan law. But there is a whole lot more going on in the representation that this community has gotten or not gotten from Eagle and those representing Eagle than has been stated so far. Dan has been able to outline some of the really terrible things that are in the current fourth consent judgment. Many of you probably know that there was a previous version of that consent judgment, which every local jurisdiction here rejected as being completely insufficient to protect our own residents and the community at large. This consent judgment, also now officially consent judgment 4, has been rushed into negotiation. And it has many terrible defects. And in addition to the ones Dan outlined, I wanted to just outline to you, Ms. Nessel. I don't know what you say to your legal staff, but I do know that there are some things going on here that disadvantage us that is not set in Michigan law. So, for example, if we take the proposed consent judgment that we all rejected, and we put it into Microsoft and we compare it to the one that was already now signed on May 19th, without any negotiation with any of these communities or with any of the parties that intervened in this lawsuit, we can see what the differences are. And just to give you an example that's a legal difference, on this prohibition zone issue, the prohibition zone has been expanded several times. The difference, if you compare these two versions of the consent judgments, the one we rejected and the one that's been adopted without our participation, you can see that a very important provision has been eliminated from how we allow the prohibition zone to expand. Previously, under the old proposed consent judgment 4, there was a goal to not allow the plume to expand eastward beyond Maple Road. And there was also this prohibition zone, which basically is a highway to dump the pollution into, allow it to run into, and allow it to run downstream where it's somebody else's problem. That is also an unconscionable goal, I think. And so what I wanted to focus on, just to give you an idea, is it used to be that to expand the prohibition zone, there had to be a showing of compelling reasons by clear and convincing evidence. That's the strongest standard, basically, you can get in civil law, clear and convincing evidence. It's akin to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But if you look at the one that's been adopted, the standard has been removed. So now it's a mere preponderance of evidence, the weakest standard used in civil law, that allows the prohibition to expand. That has nothing to do with Michigan law. It has to do with what was negotiated and put into place. So we have a lot of problems here. We have the problem of the fourth consent judgment, which in itself is ineffective, and we have a lack of enforcement that continues.
Thank you for those comments. If you'll recall, the consent judgment that was rejected by your local units of government were negotiated with local units of government and also contained additional concessions from the locals in exchange for some of the additional asks in the consent judgment. When the state of Michigan and Eagle and the Department of Attorney General supported the entry of the consent judgment as it was originally negotiated when Judge Connors entered it, and then we supported that it still be enforced when it went to the Court of Appeals. What happened at the Court of Appeals is that the Court of Appeals vacated that decision of Judge Connors and directed that the parties negotiate, and the parties being the state and Gelman, negotiate together to get to a consent judgment. By the time that happened, we had been with the outdated criteria for 1,4-dioxin for nearly a decade. Josh, is that correct? 2017. So for 5-6 years, we had been allowing Gelman to operate under consent judgment that allowed them to have 85 parts per billion in drinking water and 2,800 parts per billion as a GSI criteria. That had been going on for a number of years. We needed to get into consent judgment. We no longer had some of the concessions that the community made to make to Gelman to get those additional things that resulted in those differences between the final consent judgment that was entered and the consent judgment that was negotiated with the interveners. Again, an unfortunate occurrence given that the court made a decision that it was going to kick what had been negotiated before. And we're stuck in that position.
Okay, I know we've got a lot of questions, and we're gonna, are you guys okay if we stay a little, oh, Danielle, did you want to say one more thing?
Yeah, I'll say one more thing. And it is unfortunate, I probably would ask Brian to talk about why the clear and convincing standard was removed, but the compelling reasons still require that Gelman showing to the court that either the criteria has been lowered or whatever the other compelling reasons under the consent judgment have been made.
Any more comments?
My name's Michael. I'm sorry, and I'm a Old West Side resident of Ann Arbor. Congresswoman Dingell, I regret to confess that the last time I was with you in person was in 2016 at Eber White School. Can I see a show of hands who was there at that meeting? I don't know a speck about this issue compared to most of the people here. I went to that meeting because I got young children. I came back and wrote a letter to the president of the University of Michigan. And so I want to make 2 points to you about political willpower. Because I think you need political willpower to make a headway with this. One is that in the letter I wrote to Mark Schlissel was that did he understand what was going on with this problem? He was new to the community. Did he understand the ramifications for the University of Michigan if, in trying to recruit talent to come to the university or otherwise, people say, oh, you know, it's too bad about that water in Ann Arbor. I tried to appeal to his business interests, and I don't know if there's anybody from the university here, but I would propose to you that you recruit the new president as a big gorilla to throw its weight behind what needs to get moved to move this thing faster. The other point about political willpower I would offer is I don't know how many people understand that at the time Gelman was spraying the dioxane out on the grass, that the Dow Chemical Company had offered to take it back for a cost, so they wouldn't have to spray it all over the fields, and we wouldn't have a plume. I don't know how well known that is, but it certainly pisses me off. And if we need to motivate people to get after whoever we have to get after, I think that's something that should be shared with citizens often, because it really is unconscionable. So I hope before November we can get some political will. I'm with a fellow in the blue shirt who said, what can we do? We need direction. We need to know how to organize and who to go after and what to do. And I know you're making recommendations along those lines, but we need it from you. Thank you.
So I'm going to take that question. I'm going to say that when I first got elected, which was 8 years ago, all I saw was 4 communities that didn't agree on anything. CARD that was saying this and that. EPA, who if anybody's been engaged in this for that meeting, you remember EPA said it'll take forever, we can never do it. And I kept saying then, okay, if you don't start, you're never going to get there. And I will tell you that this listing on the national priority list is moving almost faster than any listing I've seen. And quite frankly, we had previous administrations that were just not gonna, you cannot move forward with EPA unless an administration says, okay. And previous administrations were not okay. And I was a bitch, I'll admit it. But so were you. You all came together. And I'm gonna, look, I know you're frustrated. I'm not a party to the court case. So therefore, I was not allowed to be in a lot of stuff, and everybody had to be careful because there was gag order. So I picked up a lot of stuff. But after you guys talked to me about the technical stuff, I immediately called Dana, and the two of us are not science. I mean, I'm not insulting you, Dana, but I'm right. We're not science geniuses. But I'd be trying to repeat to her what you had just told me, and she'd go, Debbie, this is like Greek, and neither of us speak it. So we're not happy with where we are, but we have put our feet on the accelerator. EPA, we're moving, we got it, but what you've got now is judges. Judges who are part of the problem. So I am looking at all of you and telling you that your elected state legislators want to get stronger legislation. They've been there for a while. Make sure elections have consequences. They have consequences at the federal level, they have consequences at the state level, and they have consequences at the local level. And there is a presidential election next year that can impact what EPA does or doesn't do. So I'm going to start there. You got a governor that listened to you and said, let's move forward. You got an EPA administration that we're finally putting money into as well, so there is money to be able to clean up these sites. And we have too many damn Superfund sites around the country, let alone in Michigan, that need to have that kind of money in there. Look, be honest. There were a lot of you that were worried that would a Superfund site, be a toxic image, and that nobody thinks that now. And by the way, there's enough data out there that shows when you do it. But elections have consequences. So if you care, we are making progress, not as fast as you want, but if this had been done 20 years ago, you would have made some of the progress you want. And now we're going to do it. We're going to keep moving forward. And remember that you need to care about who you're elected next November. That's what I'm going to say. All right, where do we, and I know I know our guests have got flights and stuff, so we're going to have to spend a little, Kathy, and then we'll take these 2 questions, and I think we're going to have to end there. They've had their hands up the whole time.
Kathy Griswold, I am a member of CARD. Anyone who wants to get involved, learn more about it, go to CARD. That is the organization. It has tremendous expertise and a lot of passion. I came in here tonight, I was also on City Council for 4 years, so I know about some of the legal issues, and anyway, I won't describe that. But I want to say I came in here really excited tonight, and we need to leave here really excited. Yes, we have opportunities for improvements, and we have problems, but we also have a dual path. So we got the port, that's more immediate, it's not perfect, but it's there. And then we have the EPA, which is the long-term strategic solution to this problem. So the other thing I want to mention, and maybe someone can address it, is this plume is more complicated because it is a glacial aquifer. And that makes it more complicated. I was also going to ask, given that we have a true leader in President Santaono, is someone going to work with him? Because we need the University of Michigan to stand up. They've remained silent way too long.
I will talk to him, I'll take that as a personal commitment. We got that, and then here, and then I think he had one over here. Then I have to be sensitive to our panelists' time. Let's go there, and then we'll go to these two.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rita Mitchell. I'm chair of the Ann Arbor Environmental Commission, and I'm speaking for myself tonight. I do want to say, though, that the Environmental Commission voted unanimously in October 2020 to advise our city to support effective cleanup of the toxic plume. And we continue to wait for the remediation, as you know. One of the related concerns for the underground plume I wanted to raise is the issue of an illicit discharge of the dioxin in the Allen Creek Drain, which is a municipal separate storm sewer system. It's called an MS4. The drain follows the surface topography and connects directly to the Huron River. As the ground elevation drops in the easterly direction toward the Huron River, it has shown an illicit discharge. And that is being monitored, but it's really important that that be included in this continued evaluation and remediation, and that's a concern that I have, because we've gone for years of finding some of the discharge and then no further action. Multiple meetings, and I'm shortening my speech a lot by saying all the meetings and discussion are kind of swirling around and going down the drain toward the Huron River, seriously. And it's a real concern, because where that Allen Creek Drain goes out into the Huron, it's just a quarter of a mile from the outflow of the Argo Cascades where people go tubing. And so potential exposure is right there. And I want to make sure that we address that as well. Thank you.
Mike, I've raised this because, trust me, you guys have raised it with me, and I've talked to Aaron, who's the acting director of Eagle right now, and he assures me that they are making sure that, I was at Ann Arbor Township, and they raised the issue of the Huron River too, and I was on the phone with Aaron within an hour. So Mike, why don't you take that on?
Yeah, all I can tell you is that our Water Resources Division is addressing the MS4 permit along with Evan Pratt, the Washtenaw County Water Resource Commissioner, to address this issue that you're talking about.
And we'll get back to you. Evan's not here. He's out of so we'll work together to get back to you with specific. Nobody's going to be ignored tonight. We're going to take and keep working. You guys.
Hi, my name is Jim Osborne. I live in Ann Arbor. Thank you for coming today. The point I'm making is it's great that you're all here for a problem that happened with this plume, but no one's talking about preventing these things. And what comes to my mind is two things. We have a pipeline that runs through Washtenaw County that transports oil. One of them runs through property through the backyard that I own. The other one is railroads that cross bridges, particularly over Barton Pond. And if there's a railroad accident, it'll dump the stuff into the Barton Pond. And the pipeline is only inspected every 5 years per federal regulation. So no matter what the state does, that cannot be changed. It has to be changed at the federal level. And the pipeline was built in 1953. So it's an old pipeline, it corrodes. And it's an accident waiting to happen. A similar pipeline in Santa Barbara spilled 100,000 gallons, 100,000 barrels into the Pacific Ocean about 5 years ago. Thank you.
So I'm going to have you ask your question as well.
Thank you. I'm Bob Wood. I've been a registered professional engineer for about 50 years, working not correct me on this, but in all my businesses, I've had to work on water, wastewater treatment. I'm also a resident, and my home is just outside the current plume. So I have personal and technical stuff. I'm interested in how did aquifer, offhand. If you don't, I can look it up. For one question, can I get my water tested if I ask for it? Is there something I can go to get my water tested?
You can always, I mean, any citizen can, for paying a fee, can get their well tested or their water tested and then send it to the Eagle Lab. There's a process for that. If you're asking for getting your water tested because of where you're at in relation to the plume.
If you're going to change the standards, I might be okay enough, but not my.
Well, what we do, that yearly monitoring we discussed tonight, is we work with the Washtenaw County Health Department.
Okay.
The technical people, myself and the technical people, Jenny Kahn is the person I work with directly. We identify and evaluate where we sample each year, depending on where contamination is and what the last sampling has been. We've come up with some rules of distances from the contamination where we want to make sure we do sample. But as far as you can request that and identify where you are to myself and Jenny, and we will take that into consideration. But it's evaluated. It's evaluated every year, and we come up with where we're sampling for that year.
Very good. I'll call them. So next question. Presuming that standards change and/or my current well does not meet the standards, what do we do? Do you have? So you're talking about bottled water. That might solve the drinking water problem, but you can still absorb things through your skin. This gentleman right here would probably like to see some studies on that, as I would as well. What do you have? You have suggestions other than bottled water for existing homeowners?
If you're currently on a well,
right?
Well, if your well became contaminated by the plume, then besides bottled water, then the next step would be to get you hooked up to municipal water.
Okay, that's not going to happen in South Township. Well, but I do actually. I've been working in this field for quite a while. There is a technical solution for this that can be done in a particular home, probably for a couple $1,000s.
Reverse osmosis?
No, ozone. You use ozone.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay.
It's very easy. I actually have most of the system installed in my home already just to remove the iron from the water.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You simply aerate it and filter out the sediment.
Right.
And an ozonator, you got a home treatment system. Not expensive at all. And I don't have a lot of hope for disappearing this plume that's been there for 30 years. But there is some things you can do on an individual basis. And it wouldn't cost very much. I don't know how much money Gelman has. You get bankrupt and still bankrupt, maybe and still not solve the problem. Sure. I appreciate all the work that everybody's doing, but I would go for a personal, technical solution to this thing that could be done very quickly. It could be done tomorrow. It doesn't cost that much money. I can tell you how to. I spend afternoons with their engineers to tell you exactly how to do it. And I've developed a system for myself. And
okay, can I get you to talk to some of the individual electeds who want to help
Sure.
you, and some of the experts in CARD is telling me that you can also direct questions to them and they would work with you.
Okay, I'd be happy to work with them if they want to. Just a comment on polluter pay, that's really good as long as they have the money.
Well, and at the federal level,
Right,
when
so you need some
we've
sort of
got
money
that,
for
you
that.
gotta put the money into it.
So let's see what you got.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
yep. I would like to address your questions about the federal level. And maybe it's a good way to close and then say there are a lot of people here I know. I try to take these, unfortunately, we've got people with planes and you
Could
want
I
to do
have
it
2
very
minutes?
quickly? Okay, go
I'll
for
take
it.
2 minutes. I'm Rita Locke Caruso. I'm Professor Emerita of Toxicology from the University of Michigan. I want to make two points. One point is that just last year, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is one of the institutes of the National Institute of Health, or NIH, just funded a center at Yale, the focus of which is 1,4-dioxane. They have projects to study remediation, detection, cleanup, toxicology, and human studies. I have the privilege of serving on the external advisory board for that center, and that has been helpful because we have generated a lot of interest from that center in our local environmental contamination, and it's opening up some opportunities for collaborations and interactions. The second point I want to make, so I just want people to be aware of that. So, the second point is that the mention of what's happening as the plume has moved east. We were told for years, for decades, don't worry about coming in contact with this plume because it's 100 feet or more below the surface. And the problem is that the majority of this plume is migrating to the east. And as it migrates to the east, the elevation of the ground is coming down to the plume. So here's the plume, and the elevation is coming to the plume. And now that contamination plume is nearing the surface of the ground. And it's in contact with some basements, and that plume is coming. And if the EPA and EGLE act quickly, we can prevent this hazard from growing. We don't have to wait till it's an emergency. The plume is coming, more contamination is coming. These are wet basements, they're in a high water table. So thank you.
She's right, and that's why we're all here. I want to, it's probably a good way to close tonight. At the federal level, we're trying hard to get that kind of legislation done. Again, elections have consequences. Fred Upton and I did a pipeline safety bill. Okay, bipartisan even, but it's almost impossible to get anything through the United States Senate. I'm sorry, but that's the, they put, so we've gotten pipeline safety bills passed through the House, but you've got a governor and an attorney general and a legislature right now that they're trying to shut down the Enbridge line under the, you see all the litigation. We have due process in this country, but people are working on pipeline safety. You want to talk about water? Those of you who are asking if we've talked to the University of Michigan. Yesterday I was at the University of Michigan at a roundtable with the advocates from around the state on the subject of water, period. Everybody's got a right to, it's a human right to have access to clean, affordable water, period. We learned from Flint what the consequences of that are. Rashida Tlaib, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we were telling people, you gotta wash your hands. And yet people's water was being shut off around the state, especially in Detroit. I said to Nancy Pelosi, Nancy, we had a pandemic and we're looking, and people are having their water shut off. One of the first things we were able to do is to stop water shutoffs. And then we were able to get, like Lockheed and others, a program during the pandemic so that there is a fund that will pay to people who can't afford their water and have water turned back on. And too many people don't know about the program. It's going to expire at the end of September. We're working again to get it permanently authorized the way that Lockheed and others are. CAN is the organization in Washington County that is, again, we're Washington County, so we're doing better than a whole lot of other places that don't know the money's out there or people even care. And railroads, what happened, we have had, and actually the Republicans are with us on this one. Unfortunately, what we saw happen in Palestine, Ohio, has awakened the country's conscience to what happens with the railroads. We are having safety hearings. We're trying to get railroad safety legislation passed. The state is working at the same time. The railroads they don't notify you when they're carrying these cards. I've learned more than I have. We had the EPA administrator came in immediately. We had a town hall with her. I want to say this about Region 5. Deborah Shore is responsive. I asked her once, do I have the worst congressional district in the country? Because, we had Flat Rock chemical spill. I've got more Superfund sites than you all realize. We were in industrial area. And nobody gave a damn when they built all these plants, and it was great for the economy, but we're left with cleaning it up. Well, we are the voices that have got to make ourselves heard and keep fighting to clean up these sites. It's been. So we want to be the leaders. We've got leaders now in both the federal and state level and the local level that want to do that. You can't stop fighting. You got to keep your voices heard. You got to keep pushing. I didn't realize Sierra Club was here, or I would have mentioned them with the LCV and everybody. We're all working hard. So you're right. keep your voices heard, engage, don't sit at home and bitch at the television, get out there and work. And remember, elections have consequences. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here. I think, look, you got a right to be concerned. I know all you're elected. We all talk about this all the time because we do care. We're going to keep working. We're not going to stop. You should be concerned. But we wanted to help you answer straight questions about where we are, what we are, who's going to manage. And actually, if some of you were in the meeting, the first meeting we were in, I was so depressed I didn't think anything could happen. We've made a lot of progress. We're not going to stop. We're going to keep protecting the citizens of Washington County. And I know that the men and women at this table want you all to be safe. And that is, and the men and women, your elected officials, are going to stay on this and not take their eye off it for 1 second. And I thank all of you for being here.
Because I've heard a lot of things tonight, and some of it involves the work of our department. You know, I want to follow up on these conversations that we're having right now. I want to talk to the subdivisions, obviously any environmental groups that have advice for us. I mean, I'm not Mr. Burns, okay? I have no ulterior motivation here, but to do everything in my power to protect these communities. That's it. I have 3.5 years left in office. You know that I'm term limited out. And I want to spend every minute of that doing as much as I possibly can to protect all of you and do whatever my department can do in regards to this plume. So I am open to suggestions. I want to keep the dialogue going. You know that Debbie Dingell is going to continue to call me 3 times a day about this. But I want to have that conversation with as many people as possible. And any questions that we didn't get to tonight, to the extent that we can, to provide answers to all of you.
And you know, she could have sent Daniel and said she was in Alaska like Aaron is, who he really is. And by the way, I want to thank Tim and for coming in. He is the head of the Superfund division. He's new, but he knew, like EPA and Eagle, like Aaron, who's the acting director and the boss of, there are many Eagle people here, was like, of course we'll do it. What's the date? And that, I mean, these departments, they want to be accessible to you. They want to answer your questions. People care. And I can remember how desperate and frustrated and angry I was when I still started. I still am, but we are making progress. And remember, I'm not a party to the courts. I think the court system needs change, and you need to work on that too. So thank you, everybody. We're all here for questions.